You have 20 seconds to comply.
Drop the gun. You are under arrest. Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Cinema Sleuths. I am Luke Deckard.
And I'm Matthew Booth.
And dead or alive, you are coming with us. Matt, let's outline the details of this week's investigation.
Well, this week we are looking at 1987's RoboCop, starring Peter Weller, Nancy Allen, and Ronny Cox. Directed, of course, by Paul Verhoeven and written by Edward Neumeier and Michael Miner. And the IMDb logline is: corporate interests resurrect a murdered police officer as a cybernetic enforcer to privatize security in a decaying Detroit. He executes lethal justice while flickering memories of his former life trigger a hunt for his killers. RoboCop.
Love it. But we are not doing this alone. We have a returning cinema sleuth. We have Sky from Film 89 coming back to talk RoboCop. Sky, thanks for joining us for this epic episode.
Hi, Sky.
Evening, Luke. Evening, Matt. Thank you very much for having me back on. If you'd got anyone else on for RoboCop, I would have been particularly jealous, and my pride would have been hurt.
No. I'm glad you could come back for this one because I know that you're a massive fan, so I'm glad to have a mega fan with us for this one. I mean, I'd say we're all probably mega fans. Let's get into that. The pre-game discussion. What's everyone's relationship with RoboCop? Sky, let's go with you.
Okay, right. As Matt may well remember, and for reasons I'm still not entirely sure why this was the case, but the UK would always be kind of weeks, sometimes months, if not several months behind the US in terms of cinema releases of films. So RoboCop 1987, I think the US theatrical release was July 17th, 87. And then, unbelievably, it was February 1988 that it came out in UK cinemas. But I was in 1987, I was 10 years old when RoboCop got its UK theatrical release. I would have been 11. It was an 18 certificate film in the UK. I was too young to see it in the cinema. So the first time I ever saw RoboCop was one day in, I think, maybe the summer of 1989. And myself and the other guys who founded Film 89 have said that 1989 was a kind of landmark year for all of us for film, but for different reasons. And one of the key moments for me in 1989 was one day when I think I was off school, either on kind of half-term break or possibly summer holidays, or maybe I was unwell. And I always remember that my parents were going out kind of around about midday. They were going to leave me in the house. And I think I must have been ill, which is why I wasn't going with them. And as my mum and dad were leaving, my dad kind of discreetly sort of nodded towards the dining room table. And on that table were two VHS tapes from the video rental store. So my mum and dad left. I went over, opened them up, and those two films were Predator and RoboCop. Now, I don't know which order I watched those two films in that afternoon, but that was a kind of life-affirming experience. I think by that point, I don't think I'd seen a film as violent as RoboCop. Because even in its, at that point, it would have been, on VHS, it would have been the theatrical version, which I don't believe had any major cuts, if any, for the UK VHS release. It wasn't the later director's cut, but it was the essentially the same as the R-rated US theatrical version. But that film left its mark on me, and I always remember being kind of feeling almost sick after the Murphy execution or crucifixion scene, call it what you want. That left its mark on me, and to this day, there's certain points in that scene where I cannot disassociate myself from how I felt when I watched it when I was 12 years old. The film made its mark on me, as did the other film I watched that afternoon, Predator. Both of them have remained two of my favorite films, but RoboCop has, whether or not it instantly became my favorite film, probably not. I think at that time, actually in my life, Aliens was probably my favorite film. And then as I sort of grew up into my teenage years, RoboCop always stayed with me as a film I loved. And then in 1999, when I got my first DVD player, the first DVD I bought was the Criterion Collection version of RoboCop, which I imported. That was region-free, so it would play on any DVD player. And that was the first time I saw the director's cut, which is only 30 to 45 seconds longer than the theatrical cut, but all of those edits are scenes of violence or shots or frames of violence or alternate cuts. And watching it, and I remember there was a group of us, we were in a friend's house, and we all watched it, the Criterion version. And this was friends who loved RoboCop as I did, but never seen the director's cut. And we were all afterwards like, holy cow, there wasn't much extra, but what was really left its mark. And it's from a point in my teenage years onwards, it became, I think, my favorite film. And certainly for the last 30 years, it's been my favorite film. It's been the film that I won't unjustly defend it. I'll never say it's the best film ever made. But it, to me, it is a near enough flawless film. But, and this is why I've got a bit of resentment to you guys for making me prep for this episode. My most recent rewatch has solidified a line that I've never really liked in the film. And now when I hear it, I just think, that's really bad. Maybe we'll come to it later. But again,
you must tell us what that is.
Well, it's in the scene where when he's RoboCop, he's having his dream, and he's in the lab in the chair, and you've got the two technicians, a guy and a woman, and they're both looking at newspapers, and the guy says, he goes, "Oh man, the goddamn rebels blew up the airport in Acapulco," and then his female colleague says, "Great, we were going there next week," and it's such a, like, the way she says it with just such. I don't know, she's just really impassive about it, like as if it's just a minor inconvenience. And it's also the convenient fact that he's reading a headline about an airport that was blown up in Acapulco and she happens to be going on holiday there next week. And I'm just thinking, I just wish they'd made her reaction more realistic. It's not a good line of dialogue. And it's the one little moment in the film which I just think, that I do a Michael Mann on that. I just make a tiny little edit and change it or remove that line completely just to tweak the film like Michael Mann has done with a few of his films.
Interesting.
But other than that, I think it's it's a masterpiece, and I'm pretty happy that I can justify why it is.
Yeah. Matt, what about you?
Well, very similar, really. So I would have been, when this released in America, I would have just turned 13. So when it was released over here, I would have been about to turn 14, obviously. But fortuitously, my brother turned 18 in 1988 in the March. So I'll go on Sky's timetable here and say that he will have fully legally gone into the video store and rented it, and we will have watched it on one of those sort of lazy school holiday summers. I remember being blown away by the violence as well, but also thinking, wow, this is something else. This is like an action adventure thriller like you've never seen.
I did not see it in cinemas because I was still cooking in the oven when this thing was coming out. I don't fully remember the first time I saw it. I have a vague memory of when I think it might have been, and I think it might have been around Thanksgiving in the early 90s. Probably around like 93, 94 ish, because also like I got into RoboCop massively at kind of one big moment. And then like, so I was into the film and I was into I know, Sky, I know you hate it, but I was really into the RoboCop TV show, the really shitty Canadian TV show that I have very little memory of, except it is now on Amazon Prime. And sometimes I go and I attempt to watch it and I can't really get through it, but like there's a little element of nostalgia there. But I do remember this moment of watching it at it being on the TV at my grandparents' house during Thanksgiving, and like the extended family's all there. You know, throughout the day, people have watched football and blah 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 blah. And it's, you know, I remember it was dark outside and it was on, and I think someone tried to turn it off, and I was like, no, I want to keep watching. I want to keep watching. And my older cousin reluctantly turned it back on, and this was all around the end scene in the warehouse. So him stomping through the water, and his RoboCop's final fight with Clarence. Everyone being sort of like, oh, should we be letting him watch this? And this is TV cut of it. Like, this isn't like the full on version. But that's sort of the like earliest memory that I have of RoboCop, and then just wanting to devour RoboCop, but never, you know, so the TV show was the closest I could really get to it, unless it was on television, and then I could record it. And of course, at the time when it's on television, it's edited and censored and all that kind of crap. So, you know, when Clarence is like, bitches leave, you know, it's going to be something like, girls get out of here, you know, some kind of like cheesy dub over the top of it. So therefore, you know, I was diving into the stupid TV show, and I was buying the toys like mad, because this was back in the 90s. And I love this. I love the fact that when we were kids, same with you guys, when we were all kids, they marketed violent R-rated movies to kids with toys. Yeah. And it was the best thing ever. Like, all my friends had Predator and Alien and RoboCop, and you know, I had a number of them as well, and it was great. It was great, but it had that sort of tease of like, I want to see RoboCop properly, but I can't because it's R-rated. I can't, you know, But somehow, and I don't know how I accomplished this. My family are very conservative Christian people in Middle America. I somehow convinced these guys to buy RoboCop from Walmart on VHS, and not only let me watch it in full, to let me watch it in full on my own at about the age of 7.
Oh, wow.
Blimey.
And I will never forget that day. I will never forget that evening. They had some friends over. I was upstairs. I remember the VHS. I remember putting it in, sitting there in the dark room, and just watching unfiltered, uncensored, R-rated RoboCop in all of its glory, and being like, fuck yeah. Remains one of my favorite films. Same with you guys. It's just, it hit at that perfect spot in my life when it just really imprinted on me. The designs were awesome. The action was awesome. A lot of the satire clearly went over my head when I was a kid, but as you get older, you start realizing what's going on, and then you start to appreciate it even more for all those different reasons. And yeah, it has just always been awesome. Like, RoboCop's design has always been an iconic. One of my all-time favorite costume designs. And Ed 209, I remember being so fucking envious going to church one day, and one of these motherfuckers brought an Ed 209 toy. And I was like, where the hell do I get an Ed 209? And I never found one. But then like 3 years ago, my wife gave me one of the big Nika Ed 209 figures for Christmas. So he's up there on the bookshelf. But so I finally got my Ed 209. I think it's safe to say this film just hit at the right time for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, the 80s was a big time for action movies, but this one had something else going on that, you know, even at 14, 15, you could see. You could see what's going on under the surface, and sort of some big themes in this film. So it wasn't just, you know, I remember some people saying, well, it's just a big shoot 'em up, and I think, yeah, you're missing the point. You know, you're totally missing the point. Yeah, it's violent, But there's so much more going on if you actually watch it. This isn't sort of just a load of shooting, blood and guts and gore. Yeah, all that's there, but that's sort of window dressing for something much more sort of thought provoking. And that's what sets this apart from from all those other 80s action flicks that is very often lumped together with for me. I mean, I don't know what you two think about that, but it's certainly set apart for me on the basis of what's going on under the surface.
Yeah, I think people that just call it a violent action film, let's just isolate then the violence aspect of the film, because it is incredibly violent. But I also think it's a really important factor of the film that gives it a unique quality, a tone. And I can't think of a film that I've seen that was released before RoboCop that had such brutal, graphic, sadistic violence. Certainly not in a major Hollywood movie. And I think this is all Paul Verhoeven's doing, because coming from Holland, where there was no equivalent of the MPAA, and he was able to do what he wished as a filmmaker in his native country before he came to the US. Now, he grew up during the Nazi occupation of Holland, and violence, extreme violence, was something he saw frequently during that period when he was a very young boy. And I think much of this just shows throughout his work. I can't think of a Paul Verhoeven film really that hasn't got, moments of extreme violence. None more so than in RoboCop, where I think he uses it to great effect. Firstly, in the Ed 209, seem to kind of almost exaggerate, how cold and callous these corporate executives are after this guy just gets completely blown to pieces by this huge hulking robot.
Physical force.
Dick, I'm very disappointed.
And then, to even greater effect, in Murphy's execution, where Verhoeven uses this extreme violence to engender audience sympathy for Murphy's character, who doesn't get a great amount of screen time before being killed. So that extreme, violence and cruelty that he's subjected to then endears us to his character and gets us rooting for him, because he isn't on screen for a great deal of time. We don't learn much about him at all, other than the fact that, he's got a son called Jimmy. And also, the fact that he's, a do-gooder cop, but also quite full of himself, quite, confident. But I think also the brutality in the film and the picture it paints of this future Detroit as this cold, merciless place. Yeah, I never think that the violence seems over the top. Or, it certainly is over the top in terms of, the on-screen violence is disturbing. But when taken in the context of the film, I think it works. And then, you've, again, the sort of siphon for the violence. Clarence Boddicker, played by Kurtwood Smith, surely one of the greatest bad guys in any film. This is an actor that you wouldn't necessarily, you wouldn't necessarily look at him and say, yeah, he's a typical, he's one of those actors like Robert Davi who would always play a bad guy. Kurtwood Smith was not that guy, and nor was Ronny Cox, both of them playing very much against type. And there's just this tone in RoboCop, which it runs throughout Total Recall and Starship Troopers, and I've always tried to put into words what it is, what this tone is, and come across an essay by this film scholar Omar Ahmed, which was done about maybe 6 or 7 years ago about RoboCop, and he puts into words something which I've struggled to do for the past 30 or 40 years. Am I okay to read this excerpt from his piece?
Yeah.
Okay. So the humor in RoboCop cuts through the moments of extreme violence to remind us of the wit that resides amidst the dread, and this is a facet of many of Paul Verhoeven's films. The removal of the helmet uncovers the unseemly sight of the bullet hole in Murphy's head, a literal scar and a visual reminder of the trauma perpetrated against him. If the trauma of an event repeats itself, materializing in different ways, the final confrontation between RoboCop and Boddicker becomes an absolution, a belated and cathartic coming to terms with the horrors of the past. Returning to the scene of the crime, the ugly industrial architecture is the ideal Jungian landscape against which to stage RoboCop's recovery, a battle of blood and steel. Now unmasked, Murphy walks again, a traumatic victim and survivor seeking to avenge those who once tried to annihilate him. There's a swagger to Murphy's actions now, gliding and evading with guile the unchecked destructive force of his villainous perpetrators who fire clumsily with their outrageous military hardware. Murphy is made to suffer once again, reliving the pain of the original traumatic event, but this time Murphy fights back, driving a spike through Boddigar's throat, killing him. The same titanium spike RoboCop used to unlock his human past, inverted now for an altogether violent source of retribution and spectacle of power. Since Boddigar is an extension of the corporate machine, a proxy for Dick Jones, the violence inflicted on both Murphy and RoboCop reiterates the trauma of capitalism as something uncontrolled, destructive, and perpetual. Ultimately, the creative intelligence of Verhoeven's RoboCop and its enduring appeal resides in the Euro-American mechanics of a film that imagines a critical dystopia in which science fiction, the Western, the action film, and horror intersect with a resounding vitality. I mean, wow. That to me just sums it up. It certainly sums up Murphy's story arc and what he goes through to get to that final, incredible ending.
That's quite impressive. Is this the essay that's in the?
Yeah, it's in the film's called Omar Ahmed. It's in the limited edition Arrow video version, which came out a few years back on standard Blu-ray, and then was later re-released in 4K.
You picked the heart. Extended warranties, financing, qualifies for health tax credit. And remember, we care.
Like let's go a little bit behind the scenes and talk a bit about kind of how Robo got made, because there's some interesting things on the journey to RoboCop's creation, I think. So it was written by Ed Neumeier and Mike Miner. I found it interesting that Ed sort of had an idea, both Ed and Mike sort of had a similar idea cooking at the same time about a super cop, robot cop. But I also like the fact that Ed got the idea, or was sort of further inspired with his idea by being on the set of Blade Runner. And then of course, obviously, 2000 AD comics and whatnot. But these guys met, realized they had a similar kind of idea going on, and started working on it together. But one of the kind of interesting issues that they get coming across is that no one wanted a robot. A robot had to be basically like Sean Young or the Terminator. They gotta look like a person. They wanted the $6 million man sort of thing. And I am just so glad that isn't the reality of RoboCop. Like, it works great for Terminator and RoboCop and all that kind of stuff, or Blade Runner. But boy, it is a relief that we got. I think the exterior of the robot, of RoboCop's outfit and what he looks like, is such an important aspect of refinding his humanity. So, for a silly example of this, but in the TV show Smallville, they have Cyborg. He comes in for an episode. Now he's just an actor. He doesn't have the cybernetic crap all over his face. It's all under his skin. And I remember thinking, oh, that's cheap. And so I feel like if RoboCop had gone that same route, would it have hit as hard? I don't know. I feel like maybe not.
No, I think the design of RoboCop, it had to be something that was timeless. And that one sheet, that poster, I mean,
yeah, geez,
God, it is just incredible. And I've had numerous, I wouldn't say arguments, but discussions with people on like groups on Facebook and other huge RoboCop fans, and the few times I've interviewed the makers of RoboDoc now on the podcast, we've had discussions about the poster and the origins of it, and the fact that it was an original black and white photograph that was then painted over into a poster. But that, to me, at no point ever does it looks like a photograph that could have been touched up, certainly, with the red light on top of the police car and the way it shines off his helmet or whatever. But there's something about that is neither an outright photograph, and it certainly doesn't look like a painting. It's just something else, and it is one of the greatest one sheets I've ever seen for any film. But it all comes down to that incredible design that Rob Bottin did for the film of that RoboCop suit, much like the stormtroopers in Star Wars 10 years earlier, which those stormtrooper designs to this day hold up.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They've got a timeless quality to them. And the RoboCop suit has as well, as has Ed 209. Like the design of Ed 209 by Craig Davis and designed by Phil Tippett, the stop motion guru who kind of took over the art after Ray Harryhausen. And we've had Phil Tippett on the podcast, and in our discussion with him, we just tried to get behind what it was about. And it comes down to the fact that he designs this creature which has got no way of emoting. And it's through the voice, and it's through the fact that that thing that it looks like a cross between a Bell Hui helicopter, a tank, and a Japanese mech. And if you look at all the different design elements that they actually cobble this together from, all the different production design drawings and concept drawings, you can see little bits of it which they kind of piece together. But at no point do any of these drawings look as just complete as the final thing that Craig Davis and Phil Tippett came up with. And it just is overblown firepower. And for the purpose they are going to use it, urban pacification, it is just way over the top. It's got these huge guns that, they look like they're firing 50 caliber rounds. It fires rockets. It is just the most insanely built or overbuilt machine just for killing. And that doesn't tie in with the words urban pacification. It's pacification through fear. If one of those things just turns on you and tells you to move your car, you're going to move your car.
Yeah. Exactly. I also love... Oh, go on.
The Ed 209 design has just aged incredibly, and the RoboCop suit even more so. And it comes down to little details about that, which when I first saw them, I can recall exactly how I felt the first time I saw him swivel his gun and put it into the leg holster that's built into his leg. Because that tells you that guy, cyborg though he may be, he has no longer got that leg. Because that is now a hollow cavity for that gun. And it's little things like that where you're never told how much of Murphy is left. But yeah, it's just an incredible piece of design.
Yeah, I love it. I also read that they used an orca killer whale was also inspired.
Yes, that's right. The face,
and you can really see that because I've loved killer whales since I was a kid. Those have been some of my favorite animals, but they're also they're amazing to look at, but they're also quite scary. And you get all of that from Ed 209. He is, and there's a reason why I didn't care about wanting RoboCop to whatever his name is, the guy, I didn't care about wanting that figure. I wanted Ed 209. I wanted RoboCop and Ed 209 because they're both peak design. Like, as you said, absolutely iconic. Like, there's nothing I would change about them.
And you mentioned orca whales. The top half of their head is black, the bottom half is white. And if you look at Ed 209, top half is black, bottom half is grey. There's that clear divide.
Yeah. Oh, it's just so good. It's just so good.
It's so good.
It looks like something that comes from a Japanese anime.
Yes.
It's that sort of design, but also as if they took that design and built it in Detroit.
Oh yes. Yeah. It's interesting because there were some struggles with the RoboCop design. They were trying to find the right thing, and if I remember right, I think it was Ed Neumeier brought a Japanese book called Sexy Robots, either to Paul Verhoeven or the effects dudes, and said basically this is kind of what let's do something like this. And I've seen the book, and on the cover is this very sleek, sexy silver woman that has a face just like RoboCop. It's this slit for eyes sort of situation, and then that sort of then triggered and made everything pop for RoboCop. But I love the fact that they were able to, as you said, like none of this looks like anime. None of it looks like it's direct copy of Japanese artwork, but the influence is so it's blatantly there, but it's so nicely done, but so wonderfully wedded with the kind of the brutal, not necessarily brutal, but the kind of that rough nasty kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Just that kind of grungy American, industrial style, just smashed together perfectly. I fucking love it.
I think also we've got to pay tribute to the fact that it was heavily influenced by Judge Dredd and how he appeared with that helmet and with the obviously lower portion of his face being the only thing you see of him.
Yes. So there seems to be a bit of controversy about this. Some say there was no influence, but how can there not be? Ed Neumeier was literally like reading the shit at the time.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Do we? They say there wasn't, but do we believe that?
No, I don't. I think there's definitely a strong influence. And maybe the truth is that in one of them, in Neumeier or Miner, originally they were thinking of maybe writing a script for a Judge Dredd film. And then that never panned out. And because, one of them had an idea about a film about a robot cop, and the other one, having been present on the set of Blade Runner, just got an idea for, something to do with androids or cyborgs or something like that. They came together, and then somewhere along the lines, this story kind of evolved into what it finally became.
Yeah. I find it hard to believe that there was no influence whatsoever. I find it hard to believe that they're on the records being like, oh no, we were reading 2000 AD and being like, oh yeah, this is kind of what we're going for, was the satire. But then Dredd's design had zero influence on Robo. Like, come on, guys, come on.
No, I was just going to say I find it hard to accept that there's no influence for the reasons you've just said. You can't read a comic like 2000 AD and see Dredd and then come up with RoboCop's head and not say there's some similarities, can you? Although, of course, you've got to have some of Murphy left over for important story reasons. So having some of his face visible is a sensible thing to do from a story perspective. So on that side of things, I could sort of say, well, maybe it is a coincidence, but on balance, I think no. You don't read a comic like that and not take something away from it, and then produce this design without, even if it's unwittingly, but without there being some sort of influence.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say, look, hey, what's the difference between RoboCop and Batman? What's the difference between RoboCop and a knight in his helmet? What's the difference between, you could make some arguments, and so maybe, but I don't know. So I found it interesting. It's also interesting that Paul Verhoeven was not really sold on this film at first and dumped the script, and it wasn't until his wife was like,
I'd buy that for $1.
I don't know another American director at the time that I could say, oh, that could have been an interesting pair of hands to give RoboCop to, other than Paul Verhoeven. Do you guys?
Yeah, I think more than most films I can think of, this is a film that benefited from the director behind it, who steered the film in a particular direction. Because I think Verhoeven, and this has never been disputed by either Neumeier or Miner, by John Davison, the producer, none of them have disputed how much Verhoeven brought to this film in terms of his own outlook on violence, his outsider's view of the American economy at the time, Reaganomics of 80s America, the fact that it was that greed is good mentality that we saw in Wall Street. And he saw all of this. And he also then saw, the decline of the manufacturing industry in certain parts of America, like the Rust Belt. And he actually used that to incredible effect by that Pittsburgh steel mill that, sadly is long gone. And the way that is used as a sort of staging ground for the creation of this futuristic, crime-fighting cyborg, but then also for him to regain his humanity later on, it goes back to that same place. And the fact that he used that I think it's the single greatest shooting location I've seen in any film. And it is just that, again, it's got such a personal link to me as well, because when I was a kid growing up, me and my friends would go explore in places like this. And near us, there was an old disused Coke Works, and we would go there and we would sneak onto the site and we would walk around. We'd be like, oh my God, this is like the steel mill from RoboCop. This is incredible. And it was just something that I've always been fascinated by, the sort of dereliction of a once great, industrial machine, and the fact that, this place is just completely been just left kind of like overnight, and there's something about the fact that so many ideas in this film came from Verhoeven himself. So many little observations as to how to improve the story and just take it away from your sort of standard shoot 'em up action fare, and inserting the socio-political commentary is just a really, really big bonus to this film kind of maintaining its appeal over the decades. And the other one is the Christ allegory, one which, when I first read about it or first heard Verhoeven talk about in that original audio commentary he did for the Criterion Collection Laserdisc from '88, I thought, Christ allegory? And then I thought, my God, yeah, he actually gets crucified, then he gets resurrected, and then in that scene at the end, as you said, Luke, he's walking on water as he's approaching Clarence Bodica. I mean, my God, this film is like an onion. It's got layers upon layers, and whereas on the surface, much like Starship Troopers was, a very straightforward sort of gung-ho action film, if you peel away those layers, there is something underneath every layer, a little nugget of his storytelling technique, his approach, his worldview, his socio-political commentary. And to me, Verhoeven is a huge part of why this film is and remains the success that it is, and why people can watch it now. Like when my son first watched it when he was 12 years old, and he thought it was just amazing. And then it's also the reason why everything else in the RoboCop franchise that came afterwards, without Paul Verhoeven's involvement, just didn't work.
Yeah. Oh, it's true. We might at the end have a couple of things to say about sequels without going into crazy detail. But this RoboCop is the shining gem of the trilogy. That's for sure. My God. No, I agree. I think I love its and I think the way he represents and is aware of what is going on in America at the time, because that's where I'm from. Where the kind of city next to mine was a huge industrial city. There were lots of factories for manufacturing and stuff like that. By the time they were all basically dead. By the time I was a kid, there was big in the 80s, but then in the 90s, we would go to this city, and all these old manufacturing warehouses were dead. There was nothing there, and now that place is more dead than ever. Like it's almost quite very, very similar to kind of the way old Detroit is in RoboCop. This big city next to we used to be a big kind of thriving city next to my nice little quaint Smallville like hometown is just a rundown piece of shit place, because it's all been corporate greed is taken everything and exported everything to other places and created this just ultra desperate place. And I just, the way Verhoeven was able to capture that, but then also with the media bites segments, because I was in a RoboCop mood, I put a meme up on our on our Twitter the other day that I think I'm the only one I think found it funny, but it was somewhere where the head of Hooters was saying how we're gonna rebrand and make this we're gonna make Hooters family friendly. So I grabbed a screen grab of the media bite, the news anchors, and I slapped the Hooters logo between them, and I was like, the shorts will be 7% shorter and the shirts will be 3% more see-through. It's for the family. Back to you, Jess. I'm like, because that was we sort of are living in it, as time has gone on post RoboCop, we've almost started to embrace like that as almost a reality, like both a mixture of Blade Runner, RoboCop, and Terminator. All these things that were like, that'll never happen.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man, we have just gotten closer and closer to this shit. I mean, like that scene towards the end, like we can jump all over the place with the story, but like that scene towards the end when Clarence's gang have been released from prison, right? And the one of the gang members who has the like diabolical laugh rocks up in the brand new SUX 6000, and he's like,
First they let me out of jail for free. Then what do I find in the prison parking lot? For a brand new 6000 SUX, still got the factory sticker on it.
Hey, Clarence!
they fucking let me out of jail for free, and this was sitting here in the car in the parking lot waiting for me. Fuck yeah. And it's like, what is going on right now? Well, fucking Donald Trump is set aside like $1.8 billion for those fucking cunts who stormed the fucking Capitol to try and dismantle the, you know, just democracy. Like, what, like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, that is something that that is like RoboCop level of satire that is like just fucking happening in real life. It's nonsense. It's insane to me.
Well, RoboCop predicted the downfall of the real life Detroit before it happened, because Detroit, in sort of the mid 2010s, it filed for bankruptcy, and downtown Dallas, Houston, where the bulk of RoboCop was filmed. Mm-hmm. Now more than ever looks like the old Detroit depicted in the film, because of all the social decay that's happened. And when they filmed RoboCop, they filmed RoboCop there because it had these high-rise buildings that looked very futuristic, and it had a city hall that looked like this incredible, at the time, futuristic industrial design. But now when you go back there, it's like the old Detroit, like where that cancer is sort of set in, like the old man says, and the cancer being crime and poverty, and there were two guys who I think about 10-15 years ago did a run through of filming locations in RoboCop, and when they went to Dallas, it was just like, oh my god, it is the shops boarded up, and just it was really quite eerie. But RoboCop predicted this in 1986.
It's like it's a great film, but at the same time, you're like, oh man,
it's depressing.
It is a little bit. Like I was quite depressed rewatching it. I mean, I love this film, but there were moments of depression. Like just if we take the opening, like the opening scene, but the introductory scene of Ed 209, like that just tells you it's almost not even hyperbolic anymore. The way that Ed 209 comes out, he malfunctions, he blows the guy up with all the big squibs, right? And then the response is,
I'm sure it's only a glitch. A temporary setback.
You call this a glitch?
We're scheduled to begin construction in 6 months. Your temporary setback could cost us $50 million in interest payments alone.
Not necessarily, sir.
The callousness, and this is something that I think I kind of came to with RoboCop much later in life, is just the callousness of we've placed candidates in prime locations. Murphy doesn't realize that he is just up for he's just a lamb to the slaughter. Hey, there's another Christ parable for you if you want. They're intentionally putting people out there that they know are probably going to get killed, and then they're going to go, experiment on them because they've signed the waiver, to allow that. And, it's all sort of very deeply impersonal and money grubby, greedy, nasty.
There's that line as well. And after Kevin Bage's character has been like totally annihilated by ED 209, when the old man says, it's going to cost us $50 million in interest payments alone, and there's the line totally blood spattered all on the desk in his office, in his boardroom. No regard for the human being on the line, annihilated on the table. He's caring about his interest repayments. Because that's what the 80s were about.
And like
money was all that mattered.
What we just said there, Luke, about the whole thing that Bob Morton, who it's only in recent years where I've realized that this film has not got just the two villains of Clarence Boddicker and Dick Jones. You could argue that Bob Morton is as much a villain as anyone else, and because of the fact
I always thought he was. As a
I
kid,
never
quick
did.
interjection,
I never did because
I always saw him as the villain.
He wasn't as anywhere near as bad as Bodica and Jones, and because he had that, sort of what's the word? He had that connection with RoboCop, and he was like, "Oh yeah, go get him, boy," and scenes like that. That you kind of became endeared to him. But if you look at what he's actually saying, what he says to the old man is, we've restructured the police department according to risk factor, placing prime candidates in these places of risk. So Murphy goes from Metro South, and Sergeant Reed even acknowledges the fact that, yeah, pretty nice place. Well, you work for a living here, Murphy. So that, and then Mansell, the first guy he talks to, says, "Where are you from?" "Metro South." "Welcome to hell." So it's quite clear that Metro West is the police precinct. The police is Old Detroit, which is the stinky part of Detroit. Whereas you would imagine Metro South, where you come from, is probably the more affluent, maybe financial district, high-rise buildings and far less crime. And the fact that Murphy, this, honest-to-goodness cop, this do-gooder cop, has come from this really nice area of policing and has been put into this absolute hellhole. And because he's such a proud, confident guy, he isn't intimidated by that. But he's actually been placed there because it's highly likely that he's both, physically, he's a prime candidate for the RoboCop program. And if he is killed, then that will be it for them. That is their ideal candidate there. They've actually orchestrated his death. So that makes OCP in particular, Bob Morton and Johnson and all of those guys, Bob Morton in particular, ultimately responsible. So when Clarence Bodica goes in his house and shoots him in the legs and then leaves a hand grenade on the table in that really brutal scene, the guy deserves it. He's a piece of shit corporate scumbag who doesn't give a shit about this guy who has been brutally executed and left behind a wife and a child.
Yeah, and I've always taken the "go get 'em, boy" line as not necessarily supporting him, but like a purely selfish.
Yeah, of course, because his success is RoboCop's success is Bob Morton's success. Because Bob Morton now is in direct competition with Dick Jones in his Ed 209 program.
I think it's down to Miguel Ferrer's performance that he's so charismatic that he's very similar in Twin Peaks when he plays the sort of pathologist, the FBI pathologist or forensics bloke, and he's a thoroughly unlikable man, but Miguel Ferrer makes him absolutely likable. And I think that's why he gets away with people thinking he's not a villain in RoboCop, because he's not an obvious villain until you start scratching the surface.
Yeah.
Because he comes across as charming and he comes across as sort of affable
yeah.
and enthusiastic in, all things that you could admire in somebody. But they're all for purely selfish reasons.
Absolutely, yeah. He's not a good guy, but he's just not as bad as some of the guys he works with.
Yeah,
I think that's exactly this guy, because that was even as a kid, I saw all of them as bad guys. Like Dick Jones is a bad guy, Bob Morton's a bad guy, Johnson's a bad guy. They all were smarmy, they were all arrogant, they were all out to get each other. Like I get, the way that I obviously, Dick Jones is super nasty, right? And he's connected to Clarence, who is ultra nasty. So yeah, sure. Like there's like a shade of difference between those two, but just I think the way that they were just both so antagonistic towards each other, and he was just so ready to just do this cutthroat stuff to screw over Dick Jones and get ahead. And yeah, I've just never seen him as any kind of a good guy. He's always been bad to me.
But you want to take him offline because he had a dream? What are you kidding? Let's get out of here. Listen, Reed, try and keep one thing in mind. This project doesn't concern cops. It's classified. It's OCP. You got it, mister?
Yeah, I got it.
But I want to let's talk a bit about the dynamic between RoboCop and Lewis, because Sky, you mentioned earlier that Alex Murphy does not have much screen time in this. Murphy and Lewis do not have much time, like no time together as partners, really. However, the way that this film is, well, the way the script is written, the way it has been shot, the way it has been edited, it is so tight and nicely conveys an instant partnership between these two, an instant friendship between these two, so that by the time, we get to the warehouse scene, she's feeling something, we're feeling something. By the time she's like, Murphy, it's you, like, you're feeling something there, and you're connected to her, you're connected to him, and I just find it so impressive that in such a short amount of time. I mean, fuck, if this was today, my God, this would be like 40 minutes of the film as opposed to like the 10 minutes that it probably is.
14.
You know what I mean? Like, if they did this in a TV show, this would be like 5 episodes out of the 10 episodes, because we really want to dive into this thing. It accomplishes so much narratively that I find it's very impressive, and I think should be looked at and studied, and current writers should try to replicate and understand what they do in these scenes to make it so great. Like, I fucking love that bit when they're walking to their car. I always drive when I'm riding, what's the phrase? I'm always, when he's like riding, easing in a new partner or whatever.
I always drive when I'm bringing in a new partner.
That's it. Yeah. It's very, very sexual, very, very, would probably today get you in trouble with HR, but there's a playfulness to them, and when he's flipping his gun outside the coffee shop and they're chatting, there's a dynamic between these two that I think is really, really great. And I also like the fact that I know there was one version of the script where there was an attempt at a romance between the two, and then Verhoeven was like, no, take that out, sorry. I think he wanted it and then realized that it didn't quite work, because I think they work so much better as just mates.
Like, absolutely.
Yeah, like, and it's funny you should say that, Luke, because this actually came up on our Aliens episode, which at the time of recording this is yet to drop, but it's in the bag ready to be edited. And we were talking about how James Cameron is a very, very much a feminist director in terms of the fact that even if it takes an entire film for Sarah Connor to become or go from meek and mild to this confident woman who would later become the mother of the future savior of mankind, to this human killer machine in the second Terminator film where she is just the ultimate badass. You've got where then he takes Ellen Ripley's character in Aliens and what he does with her. You've also then got Lindsay in The Abyss, the fact that she's this extremely strong female character who can go into these very male-centric situations and be dominant. And Paul Verhoeven is the same, because Paul Verhoeven, he took Nancy Allen, this actress who had been, who played these kind of damsels in distress in films like The Palmer's Blowout and sorry, what's the other one with the razor blade and Michael Caine?
Dressed to Kill.
Dressed to Kill. And she had played very similar characters. She plays this bitchy high school girl in Carrie. He took her. First thing he did, let's chop her hair down. Let's make her look a little bit less feminine. And then when you look in that early scene in the changing rooms, you've got males and females getting undressed together, which was something he later then did in the shower scene in Starship Troopers. Then you've got the whole, you could write an entire thesis on what he did in terms of Catherine Trammell in Basic Instinct, Sharon Stone's character. I think he is very much a very equality-driven director when it comes to men and women. And I think what he did with Nancy Allen was just incredible. Completely desexualized her, but she's also very endearing. And in a very short time, I think because of the fact that she's spent just a small amount of time with Alex Murphy, but she has seen him killed in such an incredibly brutal fashion, and she couldn't do anything to stop them, that she then becomes the audience surrogate in terms of the empathy and sympathy we are supposed to feel towards Murphy is something that she is also feeling alongside us. And I think the way that is thread into the film is just meticulously done. And you talk about the editing of the film, like Frank J. Urios, the editor, he would get nominated for best editing. And I cannot think of an example of a better edited film than this. I'm sure there are films of equal quality when it comes to editing. Like the way they fixed Star Wars in the edit was just incredible. But this film, if you look at the stuff that stayed on the cutting room floor, there's very little of it. And the stuff they cut does not work. There's a final media break ending, which is just complete garbage, and they just ditched it. They tried it with test audiences, and the point at which the test audience's involvement in the film peaked was that bit where he says, "Nice shooting, son, what's your name?" Murphy. And literally people got up and cheered. They were like, that is our ending. The coda that we filmed is not going to work. So they chop it off, the film ends there, and it to me is one of the greatest endings I've seen in any film.
Yes.
You've got a 103-minute film, and I've gone through this film, and I've tried to remove scenes. I think, is this completely necessary? The nightclub scene where RoboCop gets Leon.
Love that scene.
Yeah.
That scene, you could argue, does kind of set the film, in the time when it was filmed. You try and remove that, it doesn't work, because the way that it bookends or the scenes either side of it bookended and edited together are so seamless. Like I can hear in my head now the way that explosion that blows up Bob Moulton's house then cuts to those vials of cocaine being filled in the drug factory going into the next scene, and the way each scene kind of either smoothly or abruptly transitions into the next is like a symphony. It is the most perfectly edited thing I have ever seen. And if you try to remove any scene, or like I said, there is that one line of dialogue which I would, if not trim, then certainly change. But other than that, it is an absolute masterclass in editing.
Yeah, you mentioned the club scene. I always jokingly refer to other club scenes in movies as the RoboCop club scene. So I don't know if because ages ago, very early on in the podcast, we did The Batman, Robert Pattinson's film, and there's a club scene in there. And I think I probably, I'd be surprised if I didn't refer to that as the RoboCop. I feel like I probably did.
I think you did.
I think I did. But like, again, you have the same fucking shit in what's The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight does a club scene that I'm like, oh, okay, this is the RoboCop
with
club scene.
Eric Roberts' character,
yeah. So I love that club scene, but I just feel like I see it reused over and over and over again, but to no greater effect than when it was used in RoboCop. I think it's fucking stupid in both of those Batman movies. I think it's so dumb, but watching RoboCop slowly stomp his way through this club, grab this dude by the hair, who he just looks like what an 80s cartoon villain should look like. That's something else about this film that I love. Is when you think about, like, I don't know, if you're watching things like Ninja Turtles at the time, like this film just evokes a certain look of like 80s villain, whether it's like the high class villain or the low class villain. The actors that they got and the way that they are, like the way they look, the way they dress, the way they're designed, like they just instantly just look perfect for what they're doing. Like this it's live action, but it could also be a very stylized and exaggerated cartoon at the same time, and I love it. But anyway, yeah. But that I wouldn't change that club scene for anything. I think it's I think you can see its influences carried forward. And yeah, someone could say like, yeah, but it's also in the Terminator. It goes to noir tech. Yeah, whatever.
And I think the tech noir scene. I think the tech noir scene in Terminator is probably my favorite scene in the Terminator, because when it goes slow motion and he's stalking her and she knocks that bottle onto the floor, then bends down to pick it up as he walks past her. That to me is just, again, it's a scene where editing, sound design, and score, or not score, but it was diegetic music, are just perfectly put together to create this incredible sense of almost like this ethereal moment in time. I just think it's incredible. And obviously the Terminator was no doubt influential upon RoboCop. RoboCop is an original idea. It wasn't based off any existing, book or comic book or any other idea or IP at the time. But you can see other influences. But the fact that it is an original idea, I think, makes it all the more special that it wasn't an adaptation of of Judge Dredd or anything similar.
Yes, I agree. This was back in the day when IP wasn't as prevalent in the box
Yeah.
office. And
Sure.
my God, do I miss that? My God, do I miss that? But I also, we should probably talk about RoboCop's journey from human to robot, from to kind of back to regaining his humanity. Because every time I watch this film, I always kind of find these new little bits or other bits sort of stand out that maybe hadn't before, of sort of watching RoboCop sort of go from this sort of cold robot to, what's your name, son? Murphy. I think there's a really interesting performance from Weller throughout this whole film. And yes, there's the big sort of dream bit that sort of triggers, that's like the main trigger. But on this last rewatch, I think we actually get there's a very early moment that indicates his humanity is still deep inside there. And that is, he's come to life. He's been brought in to the police station. He's been set up in the back, and then he's all good to go. Oh, he eats baby food, blah 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 blah. And then they're like, hey, he needs a car. And then the chief chucks the keys, and RoboCop, just cool as fuck, just walks through, grabs the keys, and is like, thank you. And then keeps walking. And it's kind of cheesy, but if you think about what he was like with Lewis when they were gonna go get the car, like there's that same level of sort of swagger is there.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I'm like, that to me is the first point of like, shit, no, the human is still in there. The human is still in there. And that is that first moment with that. I don't know what you got, but that for me, I think that is the first hint. But then I just love this journey back to humanity with him, which is why sometimes the Christ allegory doesn't quite work for me. Like, I can see it in bits, but I don't see it as like, I struggle to see him as a Jesus Christ-like figure. It just doesn't fully work in my opinion. But what he represents, what RoboCop represents as this like corporate drone, and we think about it today, AI is all over the place, right? Every corporation, every business wants you to not be thinking for your fucking self, to be using AI to do all of your work funneled through there. The arts are in disarray because it is, weeding out actual people who have actual talent so that dopes can put something into a prompt and generate some shit. But it's corporations want the drones to use the software and nothing else. And RoboCop is kind of that. Like he is essentially the big corporate drone that will do their bidding, and represents, in my opinion, more than he represents this struggle between man and machine, and how much man and how much machine really needs to, how much of it needs to work together, how much of it doesn't need to be there at all. Get rid of the hand. Why? Yeah. Why? Just because you can. That's it.
The arm. We managed to save the left arm. And it's like, well, I thought we agreed on total body prosthesis. And it's the callousness of that. It goes back to what you said, Luke, about the callousness of this film and of OCP and the just shitty value that they put on human life. It's just not there, is it?
No. And you feel it today. Like this is. I mean, I don't know. RoboCop just feels so. It feels so timeless because I don't know. Is it hyperbolic? It feels like as society has progressed, we've gotten worse, or maybe just as we've gotten older, or I've gotten older, you're more aware of things, and maybe it was just as bad back then, or whatnot. I don't know. But there's just something. It hits harder. RoboCop hits harder the older you get.
Yeah,
I think that's true. And watching it this time round, it struck me really quite hard how not only prescient this film was, as we were saying earlier about what is actually happening in the world now, but also how, for a 40-year-old film, how relevant it is today with the whole AI.
It's not fucking 40 years old yet.
Nearly.
Shut
Nearly.
the fuck up.
It was filmed 40 years ago.
Shut up.
Well,
Because
I
I'm
mean, it could have
almost
been filmed
40,
yesterday.
guys. It's because I'm almost 40. It can't be 40. It can't be 40.
All right, because this film is 30 plus 10 years old. But it's still so relevant because we are turning into the very dystopia that these films were warning us about. You know, and what I found really fascinating, I don't think I'd sort of latched onto it as much as I did this time around, simply because of the furore around AI and creativity and stuff. Was this link between humanity and the machines, you know, and again, it's all through the Terminator films, but the message that no matter how much machine there is, RoboCop says it won't conquer humanity because he remembers himself. You know, the film is the journey of him remembering himself.
And that, Matt, there, what you're saying there, that then leads into what is my favorite scene in the film, which I'm no doubt you're alluding to.
Yeah,
is that in the steel mill where he unmasks for the first time.
Oh,
absolutely, and he says, "You may not like what you're about to see." That's one of my favorite lines.
Oh, I know, and the thing for me, for like when I was a kid, it was all about. And Matt, I've got to ask you this: being of a similar age, you and I both existed in that golden period between 1987 and 1990 when RoboCop was just the first film, and it was akin almost to that period in 1980 when there was just 2 Star Wars films before things started to wobble slightly. And again, I'm a huge defender of and fan of Return of the Jedi, but yeah, the stuff you guys said on your last episode, it's undeniable. But imagine being alive in that period after Empire Strikes Back, where you could argue that the franchise had peaked. Well, you know, what was your how did you feel when you first saw that poster, Matt? Because before I saw the film on VHS, I saw that poster, and that left an indelible mark on me because I know all my friends at the time were like, "Holy shit, what is this?" I mean, the tagline: "Part man, part machine, all cop."
Yeah, I mean, you'd never see. Well, like you say, you'd never seen anything like it. You know, and you just thought, "Well, what is it?"
It's even the font, even the RoboCop font that they used, which is exactly the same font that we see at the beginning of the film. I mean, and then, you know, it's got I don't know, what is the tagline? Is it part man, part machine, all cop, or is it the future of law enforcement, which is almost like a subtitle? But either way, you know, I'm looking at that poster now, and the feelings that gave me as a 10 or 11-year-old boy have just never gone away. But then as I got older, that scene you were just referring to then, Matt, when Lewis gives him what's called the care package, where she comes with the baby food, the tool to remove his helmet and the gun. That to me is where the fun peaks. And that line where he says, sorry, Murphy had a wife and son, what happened to them? And she says, she thought you were dead, she moved on. And he said, he says then, I can feel them, but I can't remember them. And that line is just, what does that mean? He can feel them, but he can't remember them. So how can he feel them if he can't remember them?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we know that he's seen them in his flashback in the house when he went to the now up for sale house. We know that he can remember what they look like. And he can feel them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But maybe he can't remember his wife's name. Maybe he can't remember his son's name. Maybe that's what he means by that. I can feel their presence, but I can't remember who they are. And that to me is where that's the key facet of this film, which has made it my favorite film, because it's ultimately a tragic journey of this guy, because he is killed in the most brutal fashion. And ultimately, if you follow his story through, we finish on a peak, but there is no cathartic, happy ending for Murphy. He is just literally, he is a face, possibly a skull, bits of brain, probably maybe some lungs, a heart, and a rudimentary digestive system, as the OCP technician puts it. There's nothing more of him left. he can't now then, regain that relationship with his wife, on a physical level. Everything he had was stripped away from him. And ultimately, when this film finishes, we have to finish on a high because there is no kind of happiness beyond that for him. And
no, exactly.
That is what makes this film so... It elevates it to a different level of poignancy, and ultimately it is a tragedy. And also that final act, like I said to you, Luke, in a chat we were having the other day, more than it being a science fiction film, an action film, to me, RoboCop is a revenge film. And that bit at the end where he's walking across the water to Clarence and he says, "I'm not arresting you anymore." It's Clarence's reaction of, hey, come on, don't get cute. You're taking this kind of personal, aren't you? You're taking this kind of personal. I mean, they shot off his hand, they shot off his arm, they riddled him full of shotgun bullets, and then they blew a hole in his head. Yeah, he is taking it kind of personal.
Well, I think that's an important point because Clarence is only seeing him as the robot, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
So, and robots can't take things personally, so that, but he's forgetting the fact that there's a man in there still. There's a human conscience in there still, and going back to what you were saying about he can't remember his wife, but he can feel her. I feel the same about the gun swiveling on his finger and putting it in the holster. That's like an automatic reaction to holstering,
it's a muscle memory.
His gun. It's just an inbuilt sort of process that he does because he's been trying to impress his son. That he's not consciously remembering it. It's just something that happens because the humanity is still there, like an automatic reflex. All that I think is brilliant stuff. I think he's really impressive and quite thought-provoking stuff. And I agree with you, Sky, that there's no redemption here as such, but there's total revenge. And the happiest he can be is when he calls himself by his name. But all he can really know is that he was once a man called Murphy who had a wife and child. And that is a very sort of bittersweet happiness to have to live with, because it's like having it's like knowing something happened without being able to remember it is a very difficult concept to get your head around, but it would be an awful position to be in, and it's a bit like, to me, this whole thing of robot with human qualities in a different sense, perhaps, but it's just as sort of mind-blowing. Is when the Terminator says, "I know now why you cry, but it's something I can never do." This is sort of mixed together in my head as these sort of human versus machine, human emotion versus machine logic and ruthlessness, for want of a better word.
Yeah,
being
it just all goes
in the same component, in it.
Yeah,
I think it's all fascinating stuff and so relevant to today.
Yeah, and fascinating is the word, because it all goes back to classic science fiction writing from the likes of Isaac Asimov that goes into the human condition, what makes a human, and ultimately then what makes an android who's trying to be a human not able to do that.
Yeah,
it's that, and it's that aspect of the story of RoboCop, which as I got older I started to appreciate more. It just, like I say, it's got layers, and I've had numerous discussions with different friends and other cinephiles about this film, and they've each got their own slightly different takes on it. Arguments about how much they think is actually physically left of Murphy, and ultimately what the morality of the tale is. And I think there's just so many different ways you can look at this film, but they all kind of mesh together in this sort of complex, perfectly edited, stitched together 103 minutes of what I just think is cinematic perfection.
Yeah, I mean, this RoboCop was on the list for us to do back when we were, Mean Streets, because this film is neo-noir through and through. It is.
Yeah.
You have the disillusioned detective. You have the corrupt. Everybody is corrupt. No one is untouched by the crime or the corruption in this in this world. Even when it's the cops are going to go on strike, you can't go on strike. What are you talking about? There's always some sort of power struggle happening throughout this whole thing, and Murphy is that, he is that tarnished knight that Chandler writes about. He is, he is in some ways, a Spade-like character. He's not gonna, he's had the relationships, but it's never going to be fulfilled anymore. There's a tease of a romance that is, a memory that he can't fully see. It's a hazy thing. I know we see bits and pieces of it, and I think, just a slight aside, but Weller's performance, I mean, just seeing what he does just strictly with his mouth and his sort of robotic movements, this kind of the slow robotic movements, are really quite impressive, and kind of going on that line of like with his family and those memories, when he does walk through his old house and those memories are trying to come to the front of his mind, and it's beginning to overwhelm him. And the way he, not only is the house split between his memories of it being nice and clean and loving, to now being broken into, and things are disheveled and ruined, and his what was his home has now been sort of assaulted, really. And then just the way he begins to get overwhelmed, and the way he moves his mouth and sort of like, almost like kind of puckers it and then bashes the screen and whatnot. It really is such a powerful performance, and I think really speaks to that sort of, this character is that he is that lone figure that, if no one else is going to do good, but I sure as fuck am, and he might not necessarily be struggling with morality, but his struggle throughout this film is, struggling with the machine versus the man. So, a Marlowe character or a Spade character might be struggling with, doing the wrong thing to get the right, to make the right, Murphy's sort of, there's a little bit of a struggle with that, because he wants to obviously, kill Dick Jones, but he can't until he's fired. But he is sort of, he still has that kind of that internal struggle that I think the classic, hard-boiled PI, classic film noir protagonist, struggles with in a way. So, and I think with any kind of noir, you don't get a happy ending. And I think when you get a happy ending, it undermines a lot. I mean, we've said that on our episode of The Big Sleep. We said that on our episode of which one was it? The Murder My Sweet. Anytime there's this sort of rewriting of the endings, but then you watch something like In a Lonely Place. Yeah, that makes sense. That ending makes sense. Robo isn't gonna get there's no happy ending for that character, because he's lost too much. He can only just continue now.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
He can only be he can only be what he is. There's no, he can't go back. He can only just survive as he is. And
that's right.
For this particular film, that's as a RoboCop. But like you say, Luke, in noir, that is just whatever the lesson the detective has learned about the world he's in, or the protagonist, if it's not a detective, about the world he's in, he has to just accept that is what the world is. And it's always more powerful than that. He might have exposed everything, but not much changes, because it will just continue. And that's the position that Murphy's in for me. That he's just this is the only life he can ever have now. He's just got to continue it and be satisfied with it. And it's a real tragedy. It's a real tragedy.
I think Matt, what you've said there is the reason why sequels to RoboCop won't work, because you have to kind of ignore the ending where he regains his humanity, much like they did in the second film. Because when the second film starts, he is not the Murphy that we left. He is a more robotic, kind of like that earlier version of RoboCop. He is not the version that we left off. And that's why I just don't understand how they made such a colossal cock up with the sequel where they just ignored the last act of the film.
Yeah,
I agree. That was my next question for you guys. Actually, was by the end of this film, when he, what's your name, son, Murphy, there's a smile, there's a twinkle. That whole last act when he's in they're in the steel mill and he's killing all the Boddicker's crew and stuff like that. Like,
Damn it. Shit.
Looking for me?
he is not that tight robot stiff guy. He's even though he's still kind of got the RoboCop movements, there's a looseness to him by the film. Like,
but you can see when he jumps out of the way of Emil's van, he almost gives a little skip and he kind of looks back and smirks, like as if he's pleased with himself.
Yes.
Yeah, he does.
Or like when he blows up the second Ed 209, when he gets out of the car, pulls the gun, blows it, and then does that backwards walk before he goes to the building. There's and even that scene when he's in the boardroom and he's Dick Jones has the guy Johnson with the gun, and his sort of movements they're no longer like the sharp dramatic robotic movements. There's a fluidity to it that's just a bit more natural. And I struggle same with you. I mean, I kind of have a slight soft spot for RoboCop 2, but it's not a good movie.
I can feel them, but I can't remember them.
With the regaining of his humanity, I guess the question is, is RoboCop the kind of thing that ever needed a sequel?
No, I don't think it is. I think it's like E.T. It didn't need a sequel. And they made huge mistakes in the second film because they ditched Basil Poledouris, whose score for the first film is just perfect, and I've not heard a score for another film that overtly reminds me of RoboCop. Like there are elements of Jerry Goldsmith's score to Total Recall that purposely paid tribute to Basil Poledouris' score for Conan the Barbarian, and Goldsmith was quite frank about that. Certainly the opening track, and so there's like a link there between scores, whereas the RoboCop score, I've listened to other Basil Poledouris scores, and they may be slight hints here and there in Starship Troopers just for a moment, but taken in its entirety, that score only fits that film perfectly. And the fact that they went with an orchestral, but also an industrialist sort of orchestral score, because you've got the moments of, the steel mill with a sort of more melodic, mournful music, and then you've got that industrial driving music, during the drug factory shootout, and then obviously the showdown at the end. The score is just incredible, and again works with everything else in the film. The editing, the performances, the cinematography, and again, there's very few aspects of this film that just don't work, if any.
I love the scene when he's just thank you. He's grabbed the keys and he's in his car, and the Robo theme just kicks into full gear. The bum 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 bum. Yeah. Now we're demonetized, and but he's driving in his car. It's like it's dusk, and everything else is quite dark around him. The buildings, the lights are on, but in the far distance you could see the kind of the vague orangeness of the sky, but the highway lights are all bright. It's such a there's something about that particular scene, the way that is composited with that music is just burned into my brain.
Yeah.
And it's just everything. It is it's interesting you say that, because with the score, I there are definitely times when I'm listening to a particular score, I'm like, oh, this could actually be from this film, or this really sounds like this other thing, and I don't think I ever think of that with RoboCop.
No.
Poledouris is just fantastic.
Oh yeah,
brilliant.
I mean, his score for Conan the Barbarian.
Conan the Barbarian, that opening operatic overture is just superb.
Yeah.
And this is as operatic, but it has those shades of 80s dystopia with it as
absolutely.
well. That's in the superb stuff.
Yeah.
So one scene that I do, there's kind of to kind of link back to something we talked about a little bit earlier. There's that bit with the gun scene, right? When Murphy is first shooting his gun in the gun range.
Hey, it's Super Cop.
That fucking gun.
This guy is really good.
He's not a guy, he's a machine.
What are they gonna do? Replace us?
I do like that they sort of slip in the original title or one of the original titles. One of the cop ladies is like, "Hey, it's Super Cop," which was a possible title for this. But I do find it funny. There's this line. They're like, "He's not a guy, he's a machine," and then another guy goes, "What are they gonna do? Replace us?"
Yeah.
And again, you're like, "Oh man, in 2026, that hits differently."
It sure does.
God, yeah. Well, good science fiction, really good science fiction has got that ability to predict the future. Like, Stanley Kubrick, 1968, 2001, where characters are walking around holding what look like iPads.
Yeah.
It's just one little aspect of that film that is just incredibly, good at predicting the future.
For all the wrong reasons, it has been really good at predicting where we are now. Yay, RoboCop. We've sort of talked about the Murphy murder scene. Is there anything more we want to say about that? Because I feel like that's a really big moment, and I don't want to undersell that moment.
Yeah, maybe we have kind of skipped over that. Yeah,
because I feel like that when they got him on his knees and they started shooting him and shit. The way Clarence does, the way he like taunts Murphy is so sadistic.
Well, what have we here? You a good cop? Hot shot? Sure you are. Why, you gotta be some kind of great cop. Come in here all by yourself.
Boddicker's gang are just so sadistic and unhinged and gel together so well, which is the way that these actors work together is very impressive, and you quickly buy into them as a well-oiled machine.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And Luke, you've seen RoboDoc and the interviews, and the second, the documentary is kind of split into 4 portions, and the second one is all about Clarence's gang, and Kurtwood Smith, Ray Wise, Paul McCrane, Jesse Goins, and Calvin Young, they all hang out together, and they sort of really bonded. And by the time then they came to shoot, they were all already kind of like they formed a friendship, like this little cabal of just these messed up sadistic guys who really kind of look like they were enjoying themselves. And I think that is what makes it more disturbing, is the fact that they are just having fun. They are blowing this guy to pieces, and they don't care if he's a father or a husband or anything, because they are the most callous low lifes that you could find.
Yeah, and one of the most callous lines in that whole sequence for me is where one of them says, almost sort of like a child whose water pistols run out. He says, "I'm all out of ammo."
Yeah,
and he can't in inverted commas play anymore. I think that is really chilling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chilling. Was that line ad-libbed? Am I misremembering that? Was that line ad-libbed?
I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised.
I don't know. No, I don't know.
I might be misremembering. I know some of them were. I think the "So Long" or "Sweet Prince" or "Sleep Tight, Sweet Prince."
Good Night, Sweet Prince. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that. Jesse Goins. Yeah. But credit to Verhoeven for just giving them free rein to sort of like the little touches that Kurtwood Smith gave his character, like that little kind of neckerchief. He had a very kind of hipster look to him, and like the little glasses that he was trying to make himself look like one of Hitler's
Himmler.
Himmler.
He looks like Heinrich Himmler.
Yeah, that's right. And the whole thing about the fact that he's always chewing gum.
Yeah,
and like when he goes into Dick Jones's office and he puts the little gum on the secretary's thing, and that was actually Kurtwood Smith's wife playing the secretary.
Yeah.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. A good bad guy, you should either like them or you should absolutely despise them.
Yes.
And
Yes.
with this, I can never say I like them, but when they're on screen, they've got my attention. And then
absolutely.
when they get killed, I'm almost like, that wasn't good enough. They deserve more. You know, they just like, you know, the crikey, Paul McCrane as Emil, you know, is there more fit in the death than the whole toxic waste? Because, oh my God, you know.
I love that shit. Oh my God. I love the toxic waste bit. I love it. Absolutely love it. But I also like that. I think what makes both, I think what adds to Clarence Boddicker's kind of nastiness and unhingedness is that there's a lot of humor, which Kurtwood Smith was intentional about. He wanted to add a bit more personality to this guy, you know, adding these little lines of dialogue, you know, do you fly, Bobby? And then tossing, you know, then tossing him out of the car. You know, all of that stuff. You just sort of, you kind of look at him, and you know, you don't necessarily think that he's an actor who could play a bad guy. Like a modern actor that might be similar would be like some like a Bill Hader. Like he's you know, you're kind of like, you're probably, you know, but then he goes and does a show like Barry, and you're like, oh, actually, you kind of work in a weird sort of way in this sort of like almost kind of weird, nasty, deadly role. And I think Kurtwood is great in that, because you look at him, you're like, you look a little bit kind of, you know, you're a bit lanky. You don't look like the typical macho 80s bad guy, and then Weller doesn't look like the typical macho 80s hero either, which I think is really a really fun thing about this film. But just the way that Kurtwood portrays this character and gives him these lines of dialogue, as you said, does these things with the gum and all that kind of stuff, it makes it just utterly just iconic. But also nasty. You're like, oh, you are like the bit when he dips his fingers in the guy's wine. I don't want to fuck with you. But he dips his fingers and then you know, snorts it, like, you know, like, oh my God, like there's this arrogance and this just nastiness that just it permeates just everything, and it oozes out of the screen. Like, to me, this gang are up there with like the ties. Like, they might be like one of the best gangs in cinema.
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I agree. And the bit where they've got all that money and it's burnt, and he has a go at Bobby. I can't remember which one it is, and he says, it's as good as marked now, you a-hole. You know, all scenes like that get me. They really work hard to convince me that this is a gang that operates together regularly. These aren't just blokes put together for the sake of a story. These people have a life outside the events that we're seeing, and I'm always in favor of that, because it makes the writing a lot more believable. You know, no matter how outrageous the situation, you're invested in it because you believe in it. And this is a great example of that. You know, these aren't just 4 or 5 schmucks put together. These are a gang that have their own identity. The members have their own identities that make that gang what it is. You know,
but as much as also Paul Verhoeven was, you know, kind of leading the way with equality in terms of males and females, it's also a multicultural gang as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which I think was a studio note. I think they said you can't make the gang like all black people or whatever. And then but the guys that they put together are fantastic. Yeah. Like it's such a great, like, they're all like nicely identified as like, they all have their wonderful traits. You know, Joe has that heinous laugh. Like, everyone has their thing. What's it? Emil has that weird fucking hairdo. Yeah. And his little beard, you know. Yeah, I don't know. There's just something so natural about the way that these guys portray these roles that I think it makes it quite terrifying, to the points where when I later saw Kurtwood and other things like that 70s show, I'm like, oh, at some point you're going to do something really nasty, aren't you?
Really horrible.
Yeah.
I think the fact that he looks like a sort of bank clerk, or, you know, like school teacher or something, adds to the sort of terror of it, because very often these gangsters do have like family lives, don't they? They appear perfectly respectable to people who don't know what they do for a living. And I think that, alongside the whole idea of him wearing glasses and not looking like a beefed up sort of video game boss that RoboCop's got to beat, he's somebody who has got a brain between his ears, and he doesn't look like a typical thug, that makes what he does all the more horrific. So I think it's brilliant casting, because originally he was auditioning for Dick Jones, and I think it was a really smart move not to cast him as that, and to get Ronny Cox doing that, because I think that they both fit these roles perfectly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And the reason is that for me, Kurtwood Smith looks like he should be in a corporate boardroom, not out crucifying people with guns and committing heinous acts of violence. It just makes it all the more sort of rewarding in a strange way, surprising perhaps. That this is your villain, because he doesn't look like one.
They're just not cookie cutter villains, are they? They don't look like your characteristic early to mid 80s action film villains.
Exactly. Yeah.
I do have to say, I also love the symmetry of the film. And that is, we open up with Dick Jones's Ed 209 malfunctioning and blowing someone off their feet with a bajillion squibs, with the ending being that Bob Morton's superior creation is then the one that ultimately does get. So it's a weird sort of sense of revenge, even for Bob Morton, who isn't alive anymore, but his creation does get revenge for what was done to him. Though Murphy is out for revenge for what was done to him, there is also this sort of interesting revenge for Morton as well, which I find quite. It's something I've never really thought about too much before. But I was like, on this last rewatch, of course, Morton's creation kills. Ultimately succeeds. He was taken down, along the way, but ultimately the thing that he did ended up becoming a morally superior creation than its creator.
We've all said that we've watched this film and we continue to find little new ways of looking at it, little scenes that stand out that maybe didn't before, or just different ways of reading it. And on the most recent rewatch, I found a line that points to the fact that it's not a perfect film, because that line always stands out as just being really bad. But the other 103 minutes of absolute perfection, it just dissolves in the high levels of quality that the film exudes elsewhere.
It is true. It is true. It's one of those films that's it's like an onion. All sorts of layers. Is there anything else that we would be remiss if we didn't bring up with RoboCop?
I'd have to say special mention to Rob Bottin's work. I know he said he designed the suit, but it's also the other things he did, like with the Murphy sort of kind of mock-up he did in the director's cut, where you see the more of his head get blown away, and that kind of work, and most famously is Emil's Melting Man Toxic Waste Demise, which is just unbelievable. The detail with the flesh coming off, and you can see the bones in the fingertips, the droopy eyelid, even the detail on the costume on his jacket, where you've got those little white bits where you think, what's that? That's just some horrible toxic sort of sludge mess, which is never supposed to have contact with a human body, and yet this guy has just been doused in it. I mean, my God, it is just this film is gruesome.
It's a good follow-up to his work on The Thing.
Oh, and 100%. Yeah,
it's sort of what you want from Rob Bottin, really.
Yeah, and he would then go on to obviously work on Total Recall and Starship Troopers, which, you know, I think that's Verhoeven's sci-fi trilogy, and I think it's one of the greatest unofficial trilogies of all time.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. That's a definitely good shout, because I was saying in the beginning of the podcast, when my very first memory of RoboCop, that was the scene that everyone was like, fuck, should we turn this off? Should we let the kids watch this? And that was seeing Emil be like, and then get plastered by the car. Like, yeah, I mean, this is an iconic film from start to finish. Genuinely a timeless film. To me, this will be one that, you know, look, it's already been going for 40 years. Yeah, okay, I'll round up. You know, it's been you know, it's stayed strong for 40 years. That to me is like, all right, this is a modern classic.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Bitches leave.
Don't you have a name? Murphy. It's you.
Nice shooting, son. What's your name?
Murphy.
Well, I think we have done a pretty thorough investigation of RoboCop 1987. Sky, thanks so much for joining us for this. This was
Sky.
Hell of a fun conversation.
No, the pleasure's been all mine. Thank you so much, guys, for getting me back on and you know, allowing me to be the person who celebrates his favorite film over anyone else he could have picked.
Yes, and I can't wait to bring you back for RoboCop 2. Lol.
I'd buy that for $1.
Well, yeah, like we said, I think we've thoroughly investigated this film, so I think we can file this one away, but we will be back with another investigation next week. So until then, take care walking down those mean cinematic streets.